Everybody, in celebration of our trip to Savannah this coming week, I decided to edit an image that has two problems. One, it's obviously really dark, and two, it's a JPEG. And the question is, can you bring back a JPEG that is this dark, that has got this many problems? Let's take a look at the histogram first. And we look up here and we can see that the histogram stretches from all the way at the left to all the way at the right. So the exposure technically is perfect, but it looks awful. Why? Because it was just simply too much for the camera's raw processor to deal with. Now, if we take a look up in here, and my goal when I took this was to make sure I protected the sky so I could bring back any color or clouds that are there. And if you look up here at the top of the histogram, you can see that the highlight clipping warning thing, which is this little arrow here, is not lit up, which means there's nothing that's 100% white. Conversely, we're showing a gray here, which means there is some pieces of the image that are very close to pure black. In fact, let's zoom in and you can see them up here. And yeah, that's about as close to pure black as you can get. It's 0.1. So there's not much there, but consider what the thing is also. It's pieces of the tree that are in shadow. So if there's some things that are almost black, that's okay. So we're going to turn that off. We don't care. So can we bring back an image that is a JPEG that has this much editing needed? And the answer, of course, is yes, or we wouldn't be here. So let's start by bringing the highlights way down. Even though they're going to be way too down, what it does is it gives us some latitude to bring up the shadows. So let's bring up the shadows all the way. Still doesn't help much. But since we brought the highlights down, we have now a lot of headroom. You can see on the right side of the histogram, it's empty, to bring up the exposure and open up the image. And I'm just going to bring it over to the right, almost to the white. And look, that quickly, just by 3 sliders, we've gone from here to here, but we're not done yet. We need to bring back now some of the color and contrast because that was lost. It was in such deep shadow. So let's go ahead to presence. We'll add some texture and some clarity. Let's add some vibrance and some saturation. And it's looking pretty good, but it's kind of cool. This should be warm in here. Again, it was in shadow, so it looked cool to the camera, but you can see there's blue in the sky. So let's go ahead and bring up the warmth. And in fact, let's add a little contrast back in. Now, what do you think would happen if we tried to select the sky out of this image? I've never tried that. Let's give it a shot. So I'm going to click on the masking panel and select sky and see if it's good enough to do it. And holy cow, it is. That surprises me. So I'm going to make the sky a little bluer, and I'm going to bring the exposure of the sky down a little bit more, just so we can get a little bit more of that blue. And that's looking great. Now, by the way, this is the entrance to a place just outside of Savannah called the Wormhole Plantation. And it has this row of oak trees that just go down towards the park. What's going on, however, is this foreground here should be a lot warmer. These fallen leaves and the dirt road should have more of a yellowish brown to them. So let's go ahead and do a mask for those. I'm going to select a linear gradient, and I'm going to I'm going to start right up at the end of it and actually come up into the trees a little. So I mentioned it needs warmth. It needs some yellow. And actually, it looks like it needs some red, too. Let's bring some magenta into there. Oh, that's looking better. And as we do that, let's add some more texture to it. So I'm going to bring up the clarity. Oh, yeah, there we go. And it's proof. You know what? I'm pretty happy with that, considering, again, just a couple minutes ago, that's where we started. Now, before we finish here, let's take a look at the composition. Do we need that much sky? What is the subject? Well, the subject is the lane leading down to this opening of the trees. So let's hit R, which is our crop tool, and let's get rid of so much sky. We don't need that much. Now, I have the golden ratio grid set here. And by the way, again, if you prefer the golden ratio, which I do, then over the rule of thirds, that's under Tool, Crop Guide Overlay, Golden Ratio. There it is. That's how you set that. So here would be that's the rule of thirds grid. In this image, the subject's dead center, so it doesn't matter as much, but I much prefer for my landscapes to work with the golden ratio. Now, one thing this is showing us is this ending point where you're going to be leading the viewer is not quite center. let's not make it slightly off. Let's make it exactly in the center. So I'm going to just bring that in a little bit so that we've got the end point, this piece here anyway, in the center. Maybe a little bit more right there. That looks good. All right, so a couple more things. Let's go to effects. I'm going to add a vignette to, again, center the viewer into the image. Do I want to help the viewer along? Oh, sure, why not? This is an optional point, but let's do it. I'm going to go up to Mask and select a brush. And I want the brush not to have auto mask on. And I'm going to basically draw a little wedge here and bring up the exposure just a little bit to help the viewer visually get there. Now, conversely with that, as I'm doing this, I want to further help the viewer get to the middle. So I'm going to create another mask with a brush, and I'm going to draw around the outsides here. Coming back, in fact, all the way down here. Let's just paint onto that, and let's bring the exposure down there. And in fact, I'm even going to change the color temperature a little bit, which will, again, further guide the viewer down the middle. I'm going to bring the temperature down a little bit bluer. And maybe even bring the highlights down just a little bit to, again, help the viewer get to the image. And I think we're in good shape. So I'll hit enter to hide those. So again, one more time, there's what we started with after the crop, obviously. And there's where we ended up with this quick edit of the road leading into Wormhole Plantation. Now, all right, I know this speed limit sign here is driving some of you nuts. In fact, and actually you can see the image doesn't look sharp because Lightroom is taking all the adjustments we made to the image and trying to draw it back into a full-size image. If we sit here and wait a little bit, it will eventually come to it, or I can force it to build a one-to-one preview. In fact, let's do that. Let's get out of this for a second. Let's see if Lightroom, with its new content-aware erase tool, can actually get rid of this thing. And notice that when I just look at a piece of it, it draws in quickly. So let's go to the erase tool. This is the content-aware erase. Is Lightroom's new tool good enough to get rid of this thing? So let's do over that, and we'll do over here on the other side of it. And yeah, it's okay. I really don't like it. It's a little too smudgy. That's a job for Photoshop. We'll save that for another day. So I'm going to go back over here to the history panel, over here on the left, and get rid of the two heels and put it back. We're going to live with the sign being there because that really is a job for Photoshop. Oh, the one last thing I did not do is I did not do any sharpening to the image. Let's look at it at 100%. And there's obviously a little bit of noise in the trees because it was so dark in there. So let's go ahead and fix both things at once. I'm going to add sharpening, which is going to make it look a little gritty. So hold down the Alt key on the masking slider and drag it over until you're just seeing the edges of the things you want to sharpen. And then I'm going to bring the noise reduction up, and that will help smooth things up a bit. That might have been a little too much. Let's bring that over. All right, that helps. Now, if this was the raw file, and I do have the raw file of the shot, if this was the raw file, then we would have had a lot more latitude in the shadows in order to bring up those shadows without having them be quite so grainy. That's a limitation of the JPEG. But otherwise, I can live with this. This would make a nice print. In fact, I'm looking at this across my 27-inch screen, probably a bigger print than I would make of this, certainly from a JPEG, and it looks quite nice. And again, when you consider where we started, one last time, let's, here, we'll go to full screen on both of these. That's the raw file we started with, and it's still trying to draw in, but that's the raw file we started with, and we took that and turned it into that. Might I do some more color adjustments? Yeah, but again, subject for another day. I just wanted to show you the edit of a JPEG that's extremely high contrast and how well you can still bring it back. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining me. I'll report to you again back from Savannah as we finish our week there. Until then, you have yourself a great week as well. Bye-bye.